Everybody, what is going on? This is the Gym Boss podcast and a special episode today. It's been ages since I've had a guest on. Got a good friend of mine. We're actually neighbors, and just so happened to one day we bumped into each other, had a chat, and found out we were both business owners. And this guy here is actually Shane Saunders. I'm going to give you the official intro today. We're going to be talking about leadership, in particularly the principles of self-leadership to inspire team leadership. And he's going to explain more depth and details about how we do that, because the more common or misconception about leadership is the top-down, like I'm the boss, you must do as I say. That sort of type of leadership, outdated, really doesn't work. I'm sure he's going to tell you a lot more about that. But to give a little bit of insight about Shane before he jumps on here, ex-military, PTI, then transitioned out of that into a personal training business, successful business with that. Then went into mindset and leadership training for entrepreneurs and business owners, particularly centered around breath work. And to give you an idea, some of the people he's worked with, if you're familiar with Alex Charfen over in the States, there's Joe Polish. He's the owner and founder of I Love Marketing. He's actually got a podcast and a whole business revolved around that. Guys at Mind Valley, Pete Evans, Taki Moore, done some training with Wim Hof, the PT Academy, which is an RTO for personal trainers, developing even a course for personal trainers around breath work. And actually, fun fact about Wim Hof, he just told me just before we went on here, Wim Hof actually wrote the foreword to their book, which is pretty cool. So we've got a lot to talk about today. But Shane, thanks for coming on today, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jimmy, it's good to be on here, and it's awesome that you're doing a podcast for your people to listen to, because I think this is one of the greatest ways of being able to get information out there, and especially information with people that get to work with lots of other people. And I think that's I feel really blessed that we get to share this information.
Yeah, I love the podcast. It's definitely been some of the guests that I've had on in the past are amazing. Sometimes some people that just want to share their knowledge with you, some of the stuff that they've done and the achievements they've had. So it's definitely my preferred source of how to consume content. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. But Shane, fill us in. Start us a little bit about the whole concept around leadership and your thought process around it, and then we're going to probably dive in and extract a few nuggets of actionable items that the guys can then take away with them.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I had a career in the military, 13-year career in the military. I was active in Iraq, and during my time as a physical training instructor, I was attached to dive teams, and then later on the TAG assault groups, and then up to the preparing for the SAS selection course, which I went through, and got to the end of that training and decided being a professional soldier for that many years wasn't something that I was keen on doing for the rest of my time. So I kind of went through the training, got to the point of going on to reinforcement cycle and kind of just going, actually, this is probably not it for me. And anyway, I got out of the military, got married pretty much soon after that, and began a life totally different to the military, which was a life of entrepreneurship. And started out with a really successful fitness business. What I didn't realize is that not only the leadership skill sets that I'd learnt in the military, looking back or during my time in the military, I was like, you take it for granted, I think, sometimes the what you go through and everything that you get taught. And it just, what it did though for me is it accelerated my business so quick that it was the business grew really fast. So that's a problem within itself sometimes.
100%.
When you're not familiar with business, right, is like explosive growth, and then things fall apart and things break. The other thing I wasn't prepared for either was people seemingly other business owners, so for example other trainers, seeing you and seeing your business grow so fast, and there's kind of staying stationary. So there was a lot of different things that kind of came to me. And then of course learning that business is not just about systems, but it also involves this big part of mindset, and it involves attitude. In fact, I always say that running a business is the greatest personal development course you can ever do in your life.
I would
Right?
100% agree with you.
Because it is going to push every button personally that you have. And I would say the only thing that I have found that has been more rewarding and probably more challenging, not even the overseas deployments or even the special forces training, is raising children. That's what I would put above running the business. So just so you got an idea, but I solely think that just hats off to everybody who has started a business and who is currently in the thick of in the trenches with their business. So this whole concept around business being personal development really led me to look at, okay, well, what I kept seeing with a lot of my clients who did run businesses, we were taking care of their physical health, but then it started to morph into looking at taking care of their mental health. And then, of course, being a business owner myself, I wanted to know more about business. So we started to look at, can we extend our business into other fields? So we ended up finding ourselves in coaching and working with coaches on their personal health and mindset. And the tool that we found was by far the most practical and the thing that has the most bang for buck, and it was breathing. It was literally breathing in and breathing out and pausing your breath and understanding the intricacies of that process. It's intimately coupled with your nervous system. It permeates both your mental and emotional and spiritual states. All of this is all involved in the way that you breathe. So, to my mind, it made perfect sense that the basis of personal excellence starts with something as simple as the way that you breathe, the amount of time that you spend introspectively. So that is, we can spend a lot of time outward focused, everything's going on, but we spend very little time to actually stop, and get into either a meditative state or a rest state and actually let our mind process. And so this has been, one of the major awakenings for me as a business owner, and also coaching people who are running, they're running high level businesses. The businesses that I coach, they're all from 3 million to 30 million currently. They're the kind of like the revenue spans that I coach. And, there's no difference between someone running, say, a $3 million business and a 30 when it comes to what is required of them, like mentally. It's actually, and we could go into a whole argument for why that is, and I'm sure there'd be people that would push back on me, but actually seeing it, there is no difference. It takes the same, you'll have the same problems at 3 as you will at 30. And all of those come back to what happens internally for you. How do you process information? How do you go through a process of personal evolution, right? And personal evolution often gets thrust upon us if we don't actually go and do something to bring it forward or to actually face into it.
How so?
Well, our life is as such that if you take the mythological version of the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is, you watch any Hollywood movie, you listen to most people's story about them going on an adventure, and it'll have these aspects of the hero's journey where, something calls someone to adventure, you get an idea, right? Let's put it in the context of business, right? You get called to adventure, you think, I'm going to start my business. All right, you meet some mentors, or you meet some wise people that kind of give you a little bit of advice. Yeah, do this, do that. They kind of arm you a little bit, right? But you can only be armed to the level of your experience that you've had. And then what happens is you start this process of going through the darkness, right? And I'm sure everyone out there is smiling,
yeah,
right? Because everybody in business has gone through the darkness, right?
Yeah.
You've gone through the doubt. You've gone through the revenue's not coming in. You've gone through people are leaving your business. You've gone through my marketing's not working. You've gone through, right? Like you name it, you will go through that process. And that's common in life. that's common in life is that we have these energetic cycles, right? Like night follows day, and this happens particularly if you look at any depth psychology or you read most accounts of even mythology and history. You'll see that there's this archetype of this hero's journey that happens where people go on these things where it goes, they get excited about something, they go through the process, they get really not excited about it, and then they come out the other side with the learnings, and the cycle restarts again. So, you know, what's really comforting out of that is no matter how bad things get in your business, it's going to get better. And then when it gets better, just be okay with the fact that you're going to go through another cycle where things may not, and to the degree that you can prepare yourself for that, to the degree that you have practices in personal excellence, then those parts, when you're going through the difficult times, you learn to actually move through those difficult times in a much easier way, right? Like it's not, it becomes less of an issue when you prepare yourself. So, we all hear be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
Right. That's all that is telling you is the hero's journey is going to perpetuate. And to the degree that you prepare yourself, train hard, fight easy. There was an old, it was written on the gym in the military gym, in the dive teams. Like there was so many different areas where I remember seeing that written. And so this, you're going to go on this journey. So you can either go laughing and dancing or kicking and screaming. But either way, you're going to go, right? Like
I've done my fair share of the kicking and screaming variation. That's for sure.
we all do. And that is, that if we take that analogy, the kicking and screaming part is the part that makes it worse than it needs to be when you're going through difficult times, right? Like, and, I guess paradoxically, that's not to say that if someone is having a real terrible time that you shouldn't be able to feel everything that you need to go through with that. But in saying that, how you respond to things, so how you react to your marketing campaign not happening, how you react to, say you overspent on Facebook ads or whatever. Like, dude, I'm just telling you the things that I get annoyed at in our business, right? Like, to the degree that you can understand that that's a learning cycle that you're going through, and that you come back and that you recorrect and that you do, you test and test again, then you'll have a better time handling that. And that will lower pressure. It'll lower the pressure and noise. It'll lower the amount of unnecessary stress that you have in 100%. The business.
I agree. There's, can't remember who said it the other day, but it was some other podcast I was listening to. And they were like, people avoid the struggles and the challenges and the obstacles in their life, no matter what it is, business or whatever. But you got to understand those challenges and struggles are what give you your skill set. So
100%.
Be grateful for them because it's making you better. And I was just like, oh, and that same other variations of you either win or you learn. So if you have that mindset instead of win or lose, because there'll be phases or seasons or whatever you were saying before where you go through and it feels like you're doing a whole lot of learning. Like, man, I'm not having many wins, so I'm having a whole lot of learning. But then, as you said, it's not forever. You come out on the back end of that. Actually, if you've done it right, smarter, better for it, and better prepared for it when something else similar comes along.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing that it does do, Jimmy, that I think these are the things that I think what I see a lot in coaching people that are running these big businesses is that a lot of people are forward-looking, right? They're forward-looking. Sometimes they'll look in the past and they'll get stuck on things. They're very rarely in the present, right? We've all heard this, you've got to be present, but it's more of a understanding how to shift your awareness and your vision to these things, right? Like it's good to reflect on the past, it's good to plan for the future, and it's good to be in the present, but you're not always going to be in one of those, right? Like all the time. And what I often find is if we're forward facing and we're looking into the future and we're worrying about what's going on and this, and we're going to get that done in the business and this, is that often you'll miss that, as you mentioned before, the pressure that gets exerted on you, say by something not going right in the business, it actually changes you in a way that you need to stop and you need to be able to integrate that. So, a lot of the time, business owners will be, they'll be running around, and this is where this really poor style of leadership comes in. It's, the style of leadership is what you mentioned at the start, where it's hierarchical leadership, where, you train everybody to come to you to solve the problems, right? And this is a double-edged sword, because one, that's how you started the business, right?
Yeah.
Let's face it. You start as you, and then when you take on the one team member, it's you and them, and then when you take on your next one, it's you, them, and them, and they're all, and then you have them report to you. They might communicate to each other, but you build this hierarchical system, and it's important to have that structure, because people that are coming into your team, they need to learn how to be part of a hierarchical structure in a team. We have lots of hierarchies in the world, and they're not good or bad, right? I know some people might have opinions on that, but say a pyramid hierarchy where you have one person at the top, there's a time when that works, right? High times of crisis, in some warlike situations, you will have those types of leadership hierarchies at work. But you also have to be aware and be able to transition to different styles of leadership, right?
So can I just cut in for a sec?
Yeah.
Is there ever a time in a business where that hierarchy, the first one, top down, where that applies? Because in my mind, I'm sitting there going, well, we're not at war, although you might feel like it is sometimes in your business. Is that what you're saying, or no?
Yeah. So to my point, if I wasn't clear, your business has to begin that way.
Oh, got it.
It begins that way. It begins that way because you get the idea. And even if you employ a team, say for example, you start a business straight away and you employ a team, it's going to be natural unless you're very, very conscious of seeding the team in a different way, which some people do that. But I still don't think it works without having this base structure of a hierarchy. I mean, that's why it's important in the military. You come into the military and they want you to be an autonomous robot, right? They want you to come in. They want you to listen and follow orders regardless. Now, while in retrospect, I look back on that and I go, wow, that's not a good way to function for the rest of your life, right? It has all these downfalls. But initially, to get quick action, to have transfer of information through the team, right? That's a very, very quick way of being able to get that kind of stuff, right? It's for maneuvers, right? They teach it in the military because they want you to be able to maneuver really quick. They want to know that if you say turn left, everyone turns left on the spot. If they say, action your weapons, everyone actions their weapons at the same time and comes up, and so there's all these reasons why you would have that kind of rote learning into it, but then you've got to evolve, right? And it's, it's like growing. Kids learn, they listen to their parents, right? You're there to help guide them through, and then eventually you want them to question you, right? No matter how painful that's going to be, you're going to learn that. You're going to learn that. I'm learning that right now because my kids are a little older than yours.
Yeah.
But you learn this acceptance of now you want them to question you. Now you want them to take on a different role in the business. And I think this is getting to kind of the crux of what we're talking about here, of where, a certain leadership style in your business called hierarchical leadership. Most leadership styles end up at that anyway. You've got either manager, owner, and then everyone else reports up the chain to that style, right?
Yeah.
But in order to take your business to a different level, right? And I'll give you the example of when you get your business to the level where you then have to create a leadership team, right? You have to create a team of leaders that are then leading the other teams in the business. So say, for example, you have your operations team, or you have your marketing and social media team, whether they're attached to your business or not attached to your business, you'll have someone who heads that role, right? And so then it becomes like what I liken it to is you go from being in normal military forces to special forces, and the transition and the difference between being in, say, normal military to special forces is there's a lot more autonomy. There's less reliance on everything needing to go to the one person, and more reliance on the interdependence of each other in the team in being able to solve problems, in a round table type of situation.
I
So,
love that. That reminds me of I read Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, and he talks about something about the what is it? Well, I forget the term for it, where it's like fractioned off decision making or whatever, and it's like decentralized. That's the word. Decentralized leadership, I think.
Yep.
And is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know you. I'm only going to mention this briefly because I know you said we wouldn't talk about this. But it's kind of what's happening in the world right now at a governmental level, and with things like blockchain and cryptos and all these things. It's a push towards having that decentralized idea, because like, the interesting thing is, I think when you're the boss in a business, when you're a parent, when you're in any position of leadership, it's easy for you to forget that people can actually sort their own stuff out. Given the right encouragement, given that you have the right self-leadership tools yourself, like you are practicing, you've got to have some kind of physical regime. You've got to have some kind of mindfulness regime. You do need to be taking care of yourself in a way. You do need to be educating yourself as well, whether that's on business, whether that you get a mentor or you join a group. You need that kind of interaction, because you can isolate yourself as a leader, and it's really easy to then have a parent-child relationship with your team members instead of an adult-to-adult relationship.
That's actually a really cool distinction and a really cool picture, because there are times with previous team where you do feel like that they're a kid. And I'm sure people listening right now, you probably got team members and then you probably feel the same way about them. How do you go about that then? Like, not being like that?
Well, it's the most interesting thing about that, Jimmy, is just like what you did then, having the realization that is the kind of relationship is step one. Step two is understanding that although you may look at somebody in your team and think that they cause that situation, given if you read anything about depth psychology, what you'll learn and understand is that you own 50% of that through projection. So you could be creating someone into the child role, i.e., making them feel like a naughty little child at work, and then they treat you like a bad parent, and it goes round and round and round. So I think that realizing and having self-awareness enough to understand what are your shortcomings as a leader, right? And this gets us back to taking responsibility in self-leadership is about that. It's about you opening up your blind spots. It's about you, forming a relationship and a situation with your team members where they can come up and say, something like, you could approach your team and say, what is it that you think I don't want to hear? Right? And
that is a great question.
Simple question like that, because the person gets to go, well, I don't think you want to hear that you ride me, when I'm trying to get this job done, not knowing where. Do you know what I mean? Like, it opens up for someone to be able to bring up, I think for me, one of the greatest destroyers of a team is withholds, is unsaid, whether someone's has taken offense to something, or they, a lot of people think they know what other people are thinking, but they don't. Like, no one knows how to mind read, right? Like, we all like to think that we know how someone is thinking, but often what we're doing is we're conversing with ourselves in our head about thinking about what the other person is thinking
100%.
about it, right? And then we have these little dialogues, and eventually people pick up energetically. They're like, all right. And I see this in teams all the time where it's like, oh, well, this person doesn't respect me and they have this problem. It's like, have you guys ever spoken to each other? And they're like, no. There's been no dialogue. There's been no communication. And it's not that they don't even not like each other. It's just that the stories they had in their own head about what they thought the other person thought about them has just completely taken over and has become the narrative.
It's like, what's the saying? Assumption is the mother of all F-ups, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, how many of these, I think it's interesting because once you can tie together, say, you know, 4 or 5 of those little, the things that you've heard before, once you can tie them together and have an experience around it, that's a powerful learning tool, because you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. It's like this. And sometimes it just takes to have that dialogue, or it takes for the leader, right, the boss, to show up and say, okay, this is how we're going to do things. It's not, it's not about going away to a weekend and holding hands around a campfire and then coming back and telling everyone, all right, we're changing everything, right? It doesn't have to be that drastic, but it can be as simple as you taking care of yourself enough to have the awareness that maybe this is happening in your team. Maybe there are different ways that you can start leading the team or preparing people for those leadership positions in the way that you be the example first, right? Like, you come out, and I think the other thing to really to understand here is that it will take the team culture changing as well. And another really useful way of doing that is understanding how to relate to people properly. Like, here's a classic example, dude. Like, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the book How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the classics.
If you're listening to this, and Jimmy, I highly recommend this, take that book out again and just read it. I've read it twice. The second time I read it was would have been about 6 months ago, and I just cannot believe how you've heard these things, but given the road or the ground that you've covered, to look back over, some of these simple concepts about being interested in people, the simple concepts around really listening to someone, not thinking about what you're going to respond, right?
Yes.
So that you're not even listening, you're going to respond with something over the top, which could be completely incoherent and not about what you were talking about, right? Just these really small little things that you can read these books, because they're timeless lessons, right? You can read these books over again, and these are the types of things that will have people rally around you as a leader. Like, these qualities of self-leadership, when you take it upon yourself to improve what it is that you're doing, this will put money in the bottom line of the business. It's what it does. And it even allows you to step out of the business. Say, I don't know if anyone has stepped out of their business for a week, or maybe you've stepped out of your business for 2 weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks. Well, this is the kind of stuff that allows you to do that and not have a phone call. And in fact, some of the leaders that I've had, that I've trained, that we've got them to the point where they can take time out of the business made more money while they weren't there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that happens. Like, I hate to say this, but that happens quite a few times. Quite a number of times.
What's the example that I was saying to somebody about a similar concept about this is the business owner is the handbrake. They're the ones that are like got the handbrake on, or the bottleneck. You probably hear that all the time. I like the handbrake example because it's kind of like you can literally like pop the handbrake off, and most of the time things flow a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
A lot better. But you can't just do that overnight, though, either.
No, the opposite can also be true. So I won't say that this doesn't come with a caveat, is that, if you're, I'll give you an example. Like, we would never have, I would never have left my kids home when they were, 3 and 1, right?
Yeah.
Like, home by themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because they're either not trained enough, or they don't have the maturity. Like, I can give you the list of all the things. So the same is to be said about your discretion on what you do in the business. If you do want that kind of business, or you are a person that likes to be hands-on, but you would like the freedom of not having everyone come to you with everything, well, then your leadership style will have to change. You will have to learn how to lead in a different way. You might have to look at what got you here is not necessarily going to get you to the next stage, right? Like,
Well,
and
let's summarize something like this. Sorry to cut you off there, but yeah, I think I think this would be really helpful. We haven't really touched on, but what are the most common frustrations you hear with people before they hear and take on your advice about leadership? Because I'm sure whatever they are very similar to what everyone else is listening right now would be experiencing, probably myself included. And then what's some of the other things, like that's the frustrations, and then what's some of the key things that they can implement, and then the benefits of those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's going to be many, but some of the ones that I see most often is expectation. I think that sometimes the owner or the boss of the business expects everybody to be putting in the same amount of hours, carrying the same amount of worries, as they are, and they might have an expectation, right, that everybody else is going to perform, or that expectation overrides their ability to actually understand that people are people, right? And they are going to come to work with personal stuff. They are going to be having personal things going on, and the ability, being a boss, it's not just about you being in charge and making money. If you've got a team, you're going to be coaching people.
Mm,
You are
100%
you are going to be
agree.
there. You are going to be there. You're going to have another little family outside perhaps your family, or even if you don't have a family, guess what? You're in training for when you do have a family, right? And I think that's one common one. On the flip side of that, Jimmy, another really common one is the self-sacrificing CEO or boss that just will not get out of the way because they feel responsible for everyone in the business, right? They feel like they have to be there, or they have to work longer hours, or that they can't quite, there's many different ways that this shows up, and and then it stifles the people in the teams. They can't just kind of like get on with what they need to get on with, because the person is not trying to control. The CEO is not trying to control necessarily out of a want to control, but it's almost usurping people's responsibilities, right? It's like, oh, I can just get it done. I'll just do it quicker. And they may not tell somebody that they've already done something, and then work doubles up. And so these are some common things that you see. The other common things that I see are, if you have someone who's super creative, right, and they don't necessarily understand how things get put together, or they don't necessarily understand how processes work, and so they can see this shining vision in their head, and they just want the team to make it happen, but no one has a plan. No one has the, well, what are the mechanics that get you there? So you have people who are highly creative that don't have someone on their team, or haven't gone to the lengths to look at, I've got this creative idea, but how do I back engineer the plan that gets us there? And then sometimes you can have the opposite of that, where you have a CEO that doesn't have much vision at all, and the business gets bogged down in just the day-to-day things, or too many systems get built, right? Or it's too confined, and people can't actually work in that environment because there's too many processes and systems. So what is a superpower for one person can be the complete kryptonite for another. And in this process of leadership, it's understanding, are you an intuitive person? Are you a thinking person? Are you a feeling or a sensing? And they have different ways that they apply their genius and how you get results. And then you have auxiliary. So, you could be intuitive, but you could also be a good thinking person. So, just understanding what that means for you, right? If you are a creative, then it's a good idea to go out and find someone who is more of a grounded energy, more of a, more of that accountant type energy, right? That's going to
So
kind of come in. So it's, you know, the relationship part of it is a huge part. That kind of ties it back to what you were saying before about relationships. I would say that the really key things for someone in a business role is to understand themselves, right? And I know that's a broad term, but it's things like understand your personality, understand your traits, understand you know, how you process information and things like that. And there's, you know, there's endless personal development stuff that you can do on that.
yeah,
You
so
know,
what would somebody that's like, cool, I've got these frustrations. My expectations are too high. I feel like they can't just find good staff. You hear that all the time. Just can't find fucking good people to save me. Or I'm slogging it. I'm the first one in, 4 a.m., opening the gym, turning the lights on. They're in there doing everything, micromanaging people because they're sacrificing themselves. Or they're that person that is like the creative or the detailed person or the whatever. I'm saying this as a broad blank brush statement, but most gym owners are more on the creative side because they love the people connected and they're not so much on the business detailed systems. Like there are a couple, I'm not saying everyone, but majority is like that. So if they've fallen into that boat or have any other frustrations when it comes to leadership, where do people start to first find out about themselves and their style and their way that they do things? I know they'll have an inclination, but do you have like any resource, like do a Myers-Briggs or something like that?
That's a really good question. And yes, so you've just named one of them. You can take most of the depth psychology type of personality profiles. Myers-Briggs is usually one of the best ones. In all the businesses that I work in, Jimmy, all of them, none are an exception. Everybody in those teams, the CEO, they all have their profiles through DISC assessments or through some form of, you know, Myers-Briggs or DISC are the two biggest ones. The one caveat that I want to say about personality assessments is it's very easy, number one, for you to lie to yourself when you're doing those tests. It's very easy, and it's not a case that you want to hide, but it's just a case of sometimes you want to be a certain way, and when you read a question that does describe you, if you're not aware, you can kind of go, that's not like me, so I'm not going to do that, when in fact that is probably more like you than anyone else. So, you know, my tip is if something really on one of those personality profiles, if it grinds your gears, take a couple of moments to breathe with that and just understand whether that is actually more like you than you would like to think. So this is one caveat that I'd like to give you on these personality tests, is that if you are going to take them or you're going to use them with your team, I would use them as I would do them maybe even 12 months or even every 18 months, depending on how long you have team members for. You know, that's a really good way. So, but simply like mention that book before, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If people have the ability to get that on audio or even to read it, that's a great place to start, just for purely beginning to be aware of who you are and what you do, right? And I realize this is difficult. This is where getting a really good coach comes into play, and going to personal development things, you know, taking your own time to go to them, because the experience, there's something about getting experiences with personal development that you can't get from reading a book, right? And I'll give you an example.
Walking on Fire with Tony Robbins.
Correct. Like that's an example. Here's another example that I do. Like we create, and this is going to sound a little bit out there and it goes off track a little bit, but we create near-death experiences with the proces's that we do. Literally.
See, that's not a shock to me, people, by the way, because we've spoke about this before when we hang out. Okay. And the first time I heard it, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? So that's probably what everyone's listening to now. So if you're spitting out your coffee or whatever, don't worry, you're not alone. I said the same thing.
Let me explain it. I call it microdosing on the fear of death, right? And like pausing your breath and holding your breath is actually a microcosm for dying. Like, and there's this really interesting thing about personal development. And when you get very, very deep into it, you begin to understand that a rite of passage creates a situation where you have an ordeal, and this gives you an emotional transformation. It's not an intellectual transformation. There's differences, right? There's differences between learning something intellectually versus learning it either by feel or by emotions or by intuition, right? And we have these 4 functions. These have been identified by depth psychology that, you're either a thinker or intuitor, feeler or sensor, right? And they correspond with earth, air, fire, and water. If anyone out there is listening and they get right into the elemental part of it. But in tribal traditions and through all recorded history, we've had these ordeals, rite of passages, and what they do is they actually mimic a version of birth, death, and rebirth. Right, and you hear this again. This is like one of those story type things, like the hero's journey. And sometimes with personal development, you need to have those experiences, and they're not they're not as grand as they're going to be something morbid, where you go and put your life in danger. But you can have these experiences without putting your life in danger. For example, you mentioned firewalk. We do ice baths. We do even just pausing your breath after you've breathed out and holding that for a very long time. Will bring you into that point of panic where you actually experience trauma that's stored in your breathing. And to the degree that you invite that into your life, that you voluntarily accept adversity into your life, this matures you mentally and emotionally in a way that you cannot read in a book. So, there's many different processes, but it becomes enjoyable. That's the thing. It's not work. And I think that's what a lot of people need to, that's the inertia that people are trying to get over. I think that when you mention personal development, people go, oh my God, I'm already running the business. This is another thing that I've got to do. And it's actually like, well, no, these things actually give you energy. Like you start feeling good about doing them, and they become a habit, and then the habit sticks, and then you have a way of bringing this about, personally for yourself. So then you start to accelerate the time it takes for you to actually learn things. So, I know, for example, doing a lot of this work and having these experiences, I absorb books faster. Much faster than I used to, right? Because I'm interested in it and I really want to read it, and I get very, very carried away by looking at the, what's the purpose of the book and what's into it. So, the starting off with something as simple as taking yourself out of your comfort zone, whether you go to a seminar, whether you find a book or a group that you can go to, whether you start with a personal coach that can take you through these kinds of things, that's really where I would start with it, because it will make a difference to the bottom line of your business.
I love that, because for everyone listening, I don't know if you might know him as well, but in the fitness space, there's a guy, Andy Frisella, and he has the company First Form, and he's got a podcast, he's got a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things he's got is this program. It's a free mental toughness program called 75 Hard. And that's what rang a massive bell for me when you said voluntarily invite adversity into your life. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is talking about, like doing cold showers, ice baths, all this sort of stuff, is what you said at the start about the thing that was on the wall. What was that quote in the Navy?
Train easy, train hard, fight easy.
That's what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is. And also the other thing that really just like lit a light bulb off in my head was like, there's a difference between an emotional transformation and what was the other one? An intellectual transformation?
Yeah.
That's so true. Man, that is so, I've had my own personal experiences of that. Mm-hmm. And that's owning a business. I like that. And I don't know why I cut in now, but I just wanted to say like those two points,
they're good.
I know those 2 points for me are just like, wow, yes, so true. So actually now, if you're a gym owner, just say you put yourself in the shoes of the gym owner, fitness professional that's listening to this, or anybody, whoever's listening to it actually. And they're usually pretty well got their stuff together. They've got the business, things are coming together, but they want to take their leadership game to the next level, and they want to start looking at this. I know you did give a couple examples like see a coach, but what's some things they can do to begin inviting in this adversity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And look, really, you know, exercise. Let's go to some obvious ones.
Mm.
Changing your the exercise regime that you have, and or take on something that's more difficult. Take on something that's a little bit more challenging. And you mentioned ice baths and heat. Here's a really interesting thing about hormetic stress. And if you don't know the term hormetic stress, it's simply a natural form of stress that has your body react in a certain way. So, say for example, when you get into an ice bath, what it's doing is your brain stem is turning on all the survival mechanisms. Like the crocodile brain is like lighting up and going, okay, let's check and make sure everything's fine here. And to the degree that you can relax into the intensity of that, will carry over into normal life. And what I mean by that is when things get hard, right? So you do the ice bath, you get out for that day, whatever comes at you during that day, you've already had your intensity level pushed right up through the roof. And so you'll relax into that challenge, right? And this is what's called hormetic stress. So that the body gets stressed and it reacts, and it reacts by releasing endogenous, whether it's norepinephrine in the brain, or whether it's BDNF, that grows brain synapses back. All of these things happen when you do things like sauna or ice. So what I would highly recommend, that you start with cold showers, or that you start with a cold plunge. If depending on where you are in the world, you can add ice to a baby pool, or you can even put ice in your tub, and it's safe enough. And what I always recommend to people, right? So I'll give you a recommendation on this. The water only has to be at 13 degrees. Now, if you've never measured water temperature, your tap temperature, even in summer, with maybe 3 bags of ice, not even, maybe 3 bags of ice, is enough to get it down to kind of like that temperature. So it's cold enough that when you get in there,
you know about it.
Exactly. It's going to shout. You're going to shout, look, I got to get out of here, right? So, if it's not like, if preparing for a marathon or doing something that's a little more challenging, that's going to take a little more time, is not up to, if you don't have a lot of time, then I would highly recommend something like this. That's a hormetic stress. Here's some of the ones that I suggest to my clients. Stop drinking alcohol for 3 weeks, right? Like, see how you go, stop drinking alcohol for 3 weeks, and then promise yourself you can have a drink after 3 weeks. Then after that, stop it for 6 weeks. I guarantee you, by the time you get to 6 to 9 weeks, the change in your sleep will be so different that you might think about cutting down your alcohol consumption, right? So there's all these little tiny things that you can do that, if you choose to take one on, will be enough of an ordeal for you to have an emotional transformation with it, right? And you don't need a coach. You don't need a coach to go and find a sauna and sit in a sauna for 10, 15, 20 minutes and get uncomfortable. Right? Like, the whole idea is that you want to be uncomfortable. You want to lean on discomfort, right? And then you start to understand that you get this different relationship with pain, right? Once you have a different relationship with pain, what we perceive as pain in our head becomes discomfort, and you're okay with discomfort. Most people are okay with discomfort. I can deal with a lot of discomfort.
I'll give an example here that might be a little bit off but it's something that's definitely real for me. Is I remember when I was getting tattoos when I was like in my 20s, and that was the fucking most excruciating thing I've ever done, right? Especially on the ribs. There was ones where I was like, I was jumping off the table every time it got me, and I was tensed up. I was like hyperventilating, and I was sweating and everything. And then now, since doing a lot of personal development work, not at the level that you've done, but I definitely do a lot of it. And then in this last 12 months, I've got a couple of tattoos, and I actually sit in there, and the sadistic thing I say to myself in my head is, man, I wish it hurt more. And then you just sit it, and I sit back into it, and I don't have that sweat reflex. I don't have that hyperventilating reflex. I don't have any of that because of that weird way I flipped it in my head. But that's only if it starts to get painful. I'll say something like that. So it's kind of off center, and I don't recommend going and get tattoos just to like make your leadership better. Like that's not, but that's what that reminded me of, and that's the stuff that I put into in that's sort of similar at least. So that's cool, man. So to recap, get out the comfort zone physically is what we're talking about, not. Well, maybe emotionally though as well. Have uncomfortable conversations.
See, like I think it's good that we start at the physical realm, Jimmy, because if you start at the physical realm, that's where it's just you, right? Like if you want to do something uncomfortable, and I'll give you some insight into how I coach and what we do. I mean, we go into what's called shadow work. We go into looking at the relationships that really turn you off, or looking at times in your life, or even your relationship with your parents, right? So you go into all these areas. Now, they are way more complex and nuanced when you go into these things, but they are by far the hugest amounts of energy that gets blocked in your body and in your life, right? In the probably thousands of people that we've worked with during either breath work or coaching, that both Angie and I, my wife's in the business with me as well, have worked with. There's these common themes that come up. So, the basis of our model, all right, we have a model, imagine a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid is physiology. That's where you start. That's where the rubber meets the road. You can deal with all the physiological stuff in your body. Your breathing is intimately coupled with every system in the body and the nervous system. So you start there, because that is where you can augment and control and calm the nervous system with your breath. It's the easiest thing. It's faster than any pill you can pop, anything like that, right? So the physiology is the base. The center of the triangle is mental and emotional, and then the top of the triangle is spiritual. Right? Because a lot of people are trying to become spiritual, but they forget about their body. They forget that you have trauma in the body, or you have pain in the body, or you're not treating your body very well. You're not feeding it well. You're not keeping it hydrated or stretching it, keeping it supple, right? Rigid body, rigid mind. They're all these very simple things. And so when you mention there to just start with physical stuff, that's where I believe that you don't need to go beyond that, because the other stuff will come, right? You'll get prepared, and you'll go looking for, okay, now it's time for me to take on my relationships, right? And that's the three pillars of what we teach a business owner is self, relationships, and then business, right? Because once you get self and your relationships right, the business becomes easier. Right? You'll turn up in the business and you'll function in the business as the leader that you're supposed to be there. And in fact, you'll grow from being in that role, but you won't grow unless you've looked at yourself and your relationships, because it's super important that you understand how they function, and that all gets seeded and begun with your own physical health first.
I love it. So if we're looking at the physical, emotional, mental is the second part, and then the spiritual was the third part to that. And the same thing, there was three parts to self, relationship, then business.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. And to give people an practical to sort of summarize that part there would be start with the physical and do things like just cold showers. You got to shower. You don't need to buy anything. No excuse to not do it. Like you can do, and what do you recommend? 60 seconds, 3 minutes?
Yeah,
like what?
Look, just do whatever you can stand. Like literally a cold shower in the morning. If you get in the morning and you start off with the water warm, and then just gradually turn it off cold, that will balance your blood sugar.
Okay.
Right? You can go and look at all the science. It's all there. Breathing. Right? Here's the very base. Like I was going to mention, Jimmy, we'll come back to the physical. At the very base of that is your breathing. Right?
I was going to ask a question about breathing.
So many problems. There's so many problems and so many ailments and so many things that you can solve by just focusing on in-out pause, that it is phenomenal.
Can you give us a quick demo? So if there's someone that could go, cool, I want to start doing the cold showers, but I also want to start doing some breathing stuff.
Cool.
Can you give us a quick run through?
I'll teach you the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself, right? Okay. As soon as you get out of bed. So as soon as you get out of bed, you sit up in the bed, or you can get out and sit somewhere out, or you can do this in bed. You can even lie down in bed and do this. Now, if you're driving a car, you can do this with your eyes open, but you can still do this. Imagine the shape of a triangle, and you're going to breathe in that shape of the triangle. So you're going to start at the bottom left-hand corner. You're going to inhale through the nose. So inhale until you get to the top or the tip of the triangle, and then let it go and come down the other side to the bottom right-hand corner. And then you're going to pause along the bottom. Then when you pause the breath so that it gets really uncomfortable. Like just keep pausing it, keep pausing it, keep pausing it, keep pausing it. And then when you're ready to let the breath in, just let it in. Go to the tip of the triangle again. Let the breath out. And now pause it again and keep holding that pause. Now, the longer you can hold this pause and the more you can drive the CO2 up, the more it's going to balance your nervous system out automatically in the morning, right? Just take a breath to recover. So all you got to remember there is shape of a triangle, inhale, exhale, pause, and hold it. Right? And what you're doing is you're leaning on the discomfort, right? You're microdosing on the fear of death when you're in that pause. So that alone, just it's termed CO2 tolerance work is another term for it. But just tolerating that CO2, tolerating that feeling of wanting to breathe, can start to auto correct the amount of CO2 that we have in our body. And retaining CO2 is a really important part of your breathing mechanism. It allows oxygen to actually flush through the body. So, we won't go into the respiratory science part of it, but just that simple act of in, out, pause, and hold that pause and extending it is a huge part. And you've already voluntarily accepted adversity into your life first thing in the morning.
Love it. And you haven't even got out of bed yet.
Uh-huh.
That's it. And then you jump in the cold shower, or you do it. Can you try and do the breathing in the shower?
I wouldn't recommend that beginning off, because you don't want to have, like, even though it sounds quite simple, you want to have your full concentration in that. I would much rather that people do those separately for the time being.
And how long do we do the breathing? Like, how many do you do? A couple like cycles through the triangle? Or?
Yeah, you can. I mean, once you really become accustomed to it, it's a really great meditation to sit in the morning. And I always recommend with our clients that you work yourself up to 3 minutes. Okay. That's it. Maybe start out with doing it once or doing it twice. Notice how you feel. If it feels challenging for you, then take that as an invitation to do more of it. If it feels really good, take that as an invitation to do more of it. Right? Like, so.
In summary, do more of it. I love it. Cool. So that's really two cool, really easy to understand and simple to implement, because you don't require any tools, you don't require any physical things that are going to get in the way of it. You just got to do it. Yeah. Right. And so that's that there. That's cool. And have you got one other thing that maybe you could share? Because I know we've gone through a lot of things, but is there any other things that you could maybe give as a tip?
Yeah, look, I think that another real, and this depends on what type of person you are, but I think writing your thoughts down in the morning. I know I'm not really someone who likes to write a lot. It's just not in my nature. But what I have found is being able to just write some thoughts down in the morning, using it like a meditation, like you would do, with the breathing, but having an opportunity just to write either your dreams down or thoughts down, or, a really good thing. We play this game with our kids, right? And it's an amazing game. It's called Sad, Mad, Glad. Right. And what you do is you say something that you were mad about, mad, sad, glad, sorry, something that you were mad about, something that made you sad, and then something that you're glad about. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to talk about things that are troubling you, and then finishing off with something that maybe you're grateful for. Right. And it gets you to kind of empty out. And so I would use the same kind of, I'd use the same kind of process with journaling. If you don't know what to do, write down maybe some complaints that you had, maybe someone that you were having trouble with, and then write down what you're grateful for. And just doing that process of being able to empty out and then maybe being able to share that with someone else, whether it's your partner, or someone else, is a really great exercise to be able to just mentally clear you. That mentally and emotionally clears you for the day, because quite often it's the unspoken, as we said before, the withholds and the unspoken things are generally the things that poison the garden of the mind.
Totally. So let's tie this back into the leadership thing. So now this is the guys and girls listening to this have got their bit of a morning routine now. They've got the showers, they've got the breath work, they've got the journaling of writing down their thoughts and things at the start of the day. Now, how do we tie this back into improving their leadership?
Yeah, this is really the basis of excellence, right? Like, in order to do big things, we have to do the small things, and this is really where it starts. I learned through my career in the military, and I've taught my kids this, is that success starts with making your bed.
Yeah.
Right. You get out of bed in the morning and you make your bed. And
see, I had a Navy dad, and same shit, right? Yeah. I have a Navy dad. I still have a Navy dad.
And Jimmy, it's brush your teeth, right? Like you think of all the habits that we do currently have that have led to success, and I bet you they all would have been built out of really small, tiny little things that we did. So, where this comes into the leadership part of it is self-leadership. Self-leadership is you having the ability to, pay attention to the small things that you do, because consistency in practices. So for example, consistency in a breathing practice, consistency in your exercise, consistency in journaling, anything that you do consistently will build confidence. And confidence is how you show up and you lead. You lead with confidence, because when you show up and you're on, you've got all your stuff, you've done all your checklists for the morning, or you show up of done, with the energy of done all your habits and things like that. This is what other people see. They feel your presence, and you'll also have far more compassion for everyone else in things that go on for them, right? Like we have more capacity as a leader when we've built the confidence and the energy within ourselves. And that starts with little tiny habits that we do. And, why not choose things that we know have a huge biological benefit, like the showers, like the breathing, huge mental benefits like the journaling, gratitude practices, these sorts of things.
I love it. And there was something towards the start. It was like, now to do all these practices, because it's the principle of self-leadership is to inspire team leadership. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think this just echoes what I just mentioned then. Like teams are inspired by each other and by a leader. People mimic each other, like we're mimetic, right? Like we want to be in a tribe where we emulate, whether it's the leader, that can have double-edged sword on it. But if you are in a team where everyone emulates each other, everyone is cohesive, and everyone understands each other on a deeper level, and it really does take for the leader to create that culture and create that situation. And so if you're coming in with capacity and compassion, then you're going to have the time to build the team that's going to take you to the next level. And that's really what it's about, is that this self-leadership leads to you then having an effective strategy for your team.
Awesome. And do you recommend then the leader going and taking this on themselves first, like these practices, and then implementing it with their team and go, hey guys, I recommend you do it, or no?
Yeah, look, that'll be how, like, that's dependent on how the team is now, right? Like if everyone's pretty good and you want to shift it up a gear, then maybe you go back to your team and say, hey, I'm going to do this. Does anyone want to do it with me? Right? Like, and, just as a recommendation, do the breathing, the showers, and the journaling. Just set yourself out, like, do it for 14 days or do it for 21 days.
So right? That actually thinks, for me personally, I think doing it with my team would be awesome. only because I think that they would be receptive to it as well.
Mm.
But there was also a quote when you just said that came to mind, which was, great teams are not made in the classroom, they're made on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, when you go through a shared experience together, right? Actually out there doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think this sort of all ties together. If you can show that you're actually trying to improve and trying to be and create this culture or whatever, instead of being the top down, they'll be more open to it and wanting to like mimic what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. No, I agree with you 100% that, while it's, while we're all individually responsible to ourselves to bring our best version of us, it's also important that we have the collective, whether it's the team or the greater community, that they're also involved in a way where, the respect is mutual, right? Like, and set it up as a team thing. And I think that it's a great way for accountability as well, right? Everyone's accountable, and a little bit of competition. A little bit of competition is healthy, and that's another thing. It's just keeping this all balanced.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Man, thank you so much for sharing all this stuff. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to include in this piece before we wrap it up to help everyone else that's listening to this right now?
No, I think that for me, it's not in the words, it's in the practice. I think that, you can listen to many things, and I know that I've done this myself. I've sat on a random podcast or a random, and it's just been the right time, right? I mean, what I've shared here, there's probably nothing that's of a revelation here, right? Like breathing, cold showers, journaling. I mean, to me, these are quite common things, but it might just be that you're just hearing it at the right time, enough for you to go, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do that for the next 14 days or 21 days. And there's just no other way of saying it. You will know when you get to the end of that, and you'll continue on, or you'll get there and you'll go, wow, like just something so small has given me so much joy and so much more energy. And really, at the end of the day, like that's what it's about. The leader with the highest energy always wins. Like that's, you turn up, you got to have the energy to implement the plan that you put forward for your business.
That doesn't necessarily mean like crazy, like you're jumping out of your skin, but like,
no. When I talk about energy, Jimmy, I talk about peaceful and powerful, like calm focus. It's everybody's got their way that they express energy. Sometimes really high voltage energy from someone who's completely extroverted is really good, and then someone who's super focused and grounded will also have a gravitas. They'll have a really strong energy, right? Like, I mean, we stand on the street, we have very different energy when you and I are talking to each other.
yeah.
But you can obviously tell that there's still a lot of energy, amongst us when we stand and have having a chat out on the street
For like 6 hours. And then our wives come and go looking for us. Where are you? We're just in the street. Oh, Shane, that was awesome. There's so many takeaways that I can't even recap them right now, but I'll try and do a little bit here. The basis of personal excellence all starts with yourself and having these things. And it's easy to isolate as a leader. You said at one stage there. So it's good to be around other people, and especially your team as well, right? Not just yourself. There was the physical, mindful, educating, and need to open up your blind spots. There's some bullet points that I've written down here. And to open up your blind spots, do a lot of self-work, personal development stuff. You can do some of those tests that were mentioned before, which are the DISC, Myers-Briggs, how to win friends and how to win friends and influence people, and any other personal development experiences, and starting with those practices probably would be obviously what we spoke about.
100%. Great little ordeal to start with.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you there'll be some people that'll be like, cold shower? I'm like, if you can't get under the cold water for 30 seconds, how are you going to run a business?
Yeah. Totally. Dude. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
And everyone, if you're listening in, go check out Shane. He hasn't even plugged any of his stuff yet. That wasn't the purpose of this, but you guys should go and check out his stuff. It's awesome. So tell us about the website, socials, and your book as well.
Yeah, you can find us at Breathe Me. breatheme.com. We have a monthly masterclass that we put on, which is a virtual masterclass. And we're also, we're on social as well. We're on Facebook. You can find me, Shane Saunders, and on LinkedIn as well.
Ooh, getting all professional like on LinkedIn as well. I like it. Mate, thanks again. And everyone listening in, if you have any questions as well for Shane, you can always reach out. Like if you got some stuff, reach out to either Shane or you can reach out to myself and I can pass it on. And I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you guys. Shane, thanks, mate. I'll speak to you soon.
Welcome.